It finally happened. Nintendo went ahead and uploaded the long-awaited release trailer. Not release trailer, but the first look trailer of the Switch 2. And, you know, among many things, it is an expected upgrade. But I wanted to talk about why I'm personally disappointed on it. Nintendo has a history of very creative consoles. A lot of that history can be tracked down, especially the most creative consoles, can be tracked down to the Iwata era of the company. The Switch was basically Iwata's final gift to the company, and it was a very successful one. But now that we don't have Iwata, the question is, will that creative spark lessen? Will the current president and current the top of the company be able to keep up with Iwata's like very unique creative streak? Iwata famously was a game designer and programmer before being the leader of the company, the president of the company. So his perspective was always very unique, and it sort of served Nintendo really well as a video game company, that got a lot of goodwill. Years ago when people were talking about the Switch Pro or like the Switch 2, like really early on. Even I say really early on, but we really had this conversation going on for what feels like 4 years at this point. Realistically, like the Switch 2 coming along, that or the Switch Pro, and it became the Switch 2 now. Ever since like 2 or 3 years, I've thought to myself, we don't have Iwata. The Switch was really successful, so the most logical thing is for them to just simply make a Switch 2. But that makes me worried because I don't think Iwata would do a Switch 2. I think Iwata would have preferred taking the fact that the company was in a really good spot to really go for something unique like the Wii U. And a lot of people don't like the Wii U, but I personally consider it to be a really, really creative piece of hardware, piece of machinery. And till this day, it's we see a lot of its genius sort of popping in and out of like Nintendo and the games that they made, and like the whys and hows they made the games they did at the time. But essentially, I thought to myself, well, they're probably not going to do a new console that's actually not just the Switch 2. It's logical, but it is kind of Iwata giving Nintendo 2 generations of video game consoles that are extremely successful post-death. And it makes me question, let's say, God willing, the Switch 2 has as long and successful a run as the Switch 1. Iwata basically dies and gives the company 15 to 16 years of incredible success with his death, which is crazy to think about, just because he was the president at the time of the production. Obviously, it's not all Iwata. There's a lot of engineers and creative artists and people in high command in Nintendo that also made the Switch possible, but like it was a product of Iwata's presidency. That being said, when there's a 2, like the Switch 2, the immediate thought I had was, well, if they decided to have a 2, they probably are considering the possibility of a 3. Nintendo has had many sequel consoles in the past: the Game Boy Advance, the Nintendo Wii U, the Super Nintendo, but all of these consoles are very clearly extensions of the life of a previously successful system, and allowing themselves to sort of iterate on the ideas and sort of come up with new ideas. But it doesn't cement like the line of mainline Nintendo console like the Switch 2 does. Now granted, maybe they actually just chose the name Switch 2 not because they plan to eventually make a Switch 3 and 4 and 5, kind of like the PlayStation, but because maybe to them they realized, okay, we've had sequel consoles before, we do not call them the blank 2 ever, and they seem to generally be less successful than their predecessors, whereas like Sony and I guess Microsoft in some ways, they have allowed themselves to have sequel-ish names, and it seems to be the case in the market that the simpler the sequel name is, the more likely it is to be successful. So PlayStation 2, 3 was less successful, but obviously 4 and 5 have also been successful. and it's like clear, simple, consistently a brand that's easy to understand, and they're sort of fighting against you know having a brand that's hard to understand. It's a big point for them. To finish my point, I think that what disappoints me out of this reveal, not only is it the lack of really new things, like the removal of the AR camera, sort of like an admittance that the Switch is all it is. The Switch is its main gimmick, and that's it. And we have no interest in pursuing sort of new avenues of gimmicks and stuff like that, which I personally think that have been really good in the past when Nintendo does them, even if they're not necessarily successful. But I think what disappoints me is it gets me closer to that world, that post the water world, where Nintendo allows itself to just sit on its laurels because they finally found the consistent golden cow for Nintendo. So, again, when there's a 2, there can be a 3 and a 4 and a 5. Sony has had a lot of success with PlayStation as their main brand. Nintendo's is slightly more unique. It seems like even now, even though I'm sort of complaining about the lack of features, it seems like they are going to do something with like the mouse and stuff like that. Like maybe they're going to make it more of like a central home machine, computer-ish machine that also plays games. But yeah, it just gets me closer to the world, the post-Iwata world. And, he's been dead for a long time at this point. But we're still sort of living in it. But it sort of makes me realize that maybe the post-Iwata world is just the Iwata world that never ends, but it never really carries on in his vision of what games can be and what a console can be and what a video game company should be. But it rides off its coattails, you think is the term? It rides off the coattails of what Iwata was, and that creativity, not elevating, not going higher, but always consistent. And that is a little distressing. Thank you for listening.